In this video, we'll discuss how scars on the face can impact your life path as well as your health and what to consider when assessing scars. Enjoy. Welcome back, y'all. For today's face reading tutorial, we're looking at scarring. I just did a video on Al Capone for my last famous celebrity, whatever you want to call it, the well-known people video I did. I discussed Al Capone, and he was called Scarface, and he had 3 scars on his face, and a number of people had asked about scarring in relation to face reading. What does it mean? How does it work? How does it impact our life terrain? There's no set designated answer. The best thing I can give you is conceptual framework. I can give you theoretical underpinnings. I can give you the foundational ideas to consider, and then you have to take that information and adapt it because it's unique to the person, and there is no one size fits all. But again, if you have this general orientation, your idea and framing of scarring will be better, and you'll have a better understanding of how to approach this, how to think about it, and what to be mindful of and what to track and be careful of. The first idea I want you to sit with in relation to scarring is that scar tissue of any kind on the body is non-conductive. It doesn't conduct bioelectricity well. So in Chinese medical theory, what they say is when you're working with a new patient, and I did this when I was in clinic and I was doing my rounds, working with acupuncture, herbs, body work, and trying to get to the root causes of what was causing problems in people. One of the things they talk about is that you want to be mindful and ask your patients during the intake, do you have any noticeable scars? And if so, where are they on your body? Whether they're on the neck, the arm, the knee, the thigh, doesn't really matter. We want to pay attention to this because that scar tissue, if it's non-conductive and a scar cuts through, say, the stomach channel, that means that as the bioelectric current moves through the stomach channel, that point of non-conduction, wherever the scarring is going to disrupt that channel a bit. So what does that mean? That means it's likely going to slow or maybe even stagnate some of the physiological function of that organ, and then also the psycho-emotional components that go with it. The organs digest thought and emotion, so the thought patterns and emotional rhythms that go with that organ can also be disrupted. So if you have that basic idea sort of at the forefront, this gives you a framework to look at the face. And if you have a scar on the face, you want to pay attention to this because that means the geographies of that area are likely going to be impacted. So many of you have seen this facial map that I've drawn. I use it in a lot of my videos. So I'm going to keep this pretty simple. But you'll notice if you look at this facial map, let's go with fire. Fire is red, right? That's the color. That's the color associated with fire. So if you look at the areas on the face here that are red, that relates to the fire element. You'll notice that the small intestine is pink. You'll notice that the pericardium is actually purple, which falls into the red spectrum if you think of the purple component in a flame. There's purple, blue kind of colors a little bit, and then orange and yellow and kind of red. Okay, think of those as fire colors. So if we have a scar in this area, that element is going to be impacted. The fire element regulates joy, happiness, also mania and hysteria. So I'm not going to do a deep dive into every single organ. The comment section is for that. If you have specific questions, I can talk about it. Go to my videos and watch the 5-element correspondences. But I want you to understand this, that if we have a scar somewhere on the face and it shows up, you want to use this facial map as a reference point. So if we go to earth, okay, very quickly, earth regulates the spleen and stomach, and the color associated with it is yellow. So these areas right here, that's the earth color. Metal is the white area, white and gray. Think of like metal colored themes. Water is the blue areas, wood is the green areas. And then you can look at the organ correspondences here. So with that general template, you want to start paying attention, where is my scar? Or multiple scars. If you have acne scars and you have an area clustered on the cheek, that means your metal element, your lung area, is likely going to be disrupted some. If it's disrupted, that means you have to now look at the emotional themes that go with the metal element. Okay, so for reference, I'm not going to do them all, but lung relates to grief and sadness, depression, that kind of thing, and then also nostalgia, a healthy relationship to the past. So if we're having a lot of scarring around the cheeks in that area, that system and those emotional rhythms will be impacted. That's the way to think about face reading and to think about scarring. I can't tell you, well, if you have scars there, it means this about your life terrain. I'm not psychic. This isn't a predictive process. I have to ask. I have to be realistic and reasonable and dive in with people and say, okay, well, you have scarring in this area. Have you had disruption in these areas? This is why it's good to get a face reading from someone like me so that I can dive in and specifically target these things should you have concerns around it. But this is the general idea. I don't want you to get too hung up on finding deep spiritual meaning with a scar on the face. When I made the Al Capone video, what I talked about was, one of the threads was, I said, look, when we get a scar, especially if it's been inflicted through a car accident, a fire, we've had something like that, the East does say, yeah, there's probably a karmic link there in some way or another. There's some kind of karma being unwound if you carry a scar on the face for the rest of your life. But again, there's nothing concrete about that. That's sort of an intuitive, abstract concept that you have to work with a face reader around. I can't give a one-size-fits-all, but I do want you to think about this. Scar tissue is non-conductive. It does not conduct bioelectricity as well as healthy tissue. So you want to pay attention to where you have your scars, because again, if it's on the face or it's somewhere through the water area or the wood area, wherever the scar is, that area is likely going to experience some disruption. And you've got to do a little digging on what are the emotional themes of that element and what are the organs associated with that element. So, quick little side note. I was working with a woman in her late 20s when I was in grad school for acupuncture. She had it was a brick wall, had collapsed and fallen onto her leg, and it shattered her leg when she was 8 or 9 years old. She'd had a lot of surgeries as a result of this. Lots of surgery. She has metal in her femur to hold it together. They had to cut her open a bunch of times. She was then, again, in her late 20s or so, maybe early 30s, but she had a lot of pain all the time. And she said it's not necessarily in the bone. It feels like it's in the surface and kind of in the muscle. It's all around. And so one of the things we did, one of the techniques in acupuncture theory, is to needle scar tissue. A different, more accessible version of this is microdermal needling. People do this on their face. People do this on scars as well. Those little tiny pinpricks that come from those microdermal needles will basically create little tiny wounds in the scar tissue. But as you do that, what starts to happen, if you use topical oils like castor oil, or you use things like silicone, which can actually soften and help break down scar tissue, if you do this, what starts to happen is it starts to bring blood flow and some kind of repair to the scar tissue. And as you do that, pain diminishes. So with her, when they talk about this, the blockage, they talk about this very specifically. When there is blockage, that means chi is blocked or stagnating. When chi is free flowing, there is no pain in theory. And that's usually the case in my experience. What I've seen is that when chi is flowing easily, there's no pain. So what we did for this woman was we needled her scars. Now, we didn't do microdermal needling. These were pretty big scars, but we would take a needle, and some of her scars were raised, and we would basically just stick needles all the way through, just all the way up the scar. And then let it sit, let it do its work. And we did this over many sessions. And what we found over weeks of treating her, and it ended up being months, as we did this, her pain started to go down. And all that was happening is that we were addressing the scar tissue. So I'm telling you that story in relation to this idea that it's non-conductive. Pay attention to where scars are on the face, because again, if this happens, those channels and those emotional and psychological rhythms will be impacted. If you have questions, which I'm sure you do, there's a lot here, please put them down in the comment section. And as always, thanks for your time.